with the less focused on the weight itself, I'm guessing by that you sort of mean less focused on I weigh X amount and I put on X amount and I need to lose X amount to be healthy in whatever term you deem it. But then there's obviously, as you alluded to, a lot of different factors that actually result in weight gain or result in people being what would be termed as overweight. It's not necessarily just diet. There's stress, there's lifestyle, there's so many different parts of it. So how do you then approach that? Obviously, being predominantly like a dietitian and a nutritionist, naturally you're going to look a bit at diet. So how do you almost approach not being too focused on weight, but actually still having the conversation of, if you eat this, it is going to result in you putting on more weight or you not losing the weight that you want, because it's such a big factor as well as being delicate about it by not saying once you lose 10 kilos, that's you healthy, because obviously it's not as binary as that.
No, and you kind of hit the nail on the head there, and the fact that there's so many factors that influence whether or not we gain weight or our body is a certain size. And diet and what we eat is definitely one of them. And you're right, like that's my job. I love it. But I feel like having the approach that it's not the only factor makes me practice in a much more holistic way. And especially like this comes up a lot with PCOS, which is the kind of patient group that I work with the most, because often with PCOS, the advice is, okay, just go away and lose weight. And actually, because we see that a lot of people with PCOS do have issues with their weight and they're more likely to gain weight. Not everybody, but a lot of people with PCOS struggle with weight issues. And the advice has classically been, lose weight and it will solve all your problems. But actually, if you think about why people, like what actually influences people's body size and their weight, you do have to take a holistic approach, because your sleep affects your appetite, your stress levels, whether or not you can afford healthy food, so to speak, like what's actually available to you. So it's also those social determinants of health that have a big role. So understanding your patient, your client, and where they're coming from, what's led to them having the eating behaviors, or I would say also health behaviors that they have now. Like, what's their journey been like and what's influenced who they are now? You have to understand all of that before you start saying, do you know what, you should choose X over Y when it comes to your diet, because they will have a very different set of food beliefs and a different perspective on food than you or the next person that walks through your door.
It's a funny one, because obviously if someone's come through your door and spoken to you, and there's a lot of different maybe health tick boxes that you can go through and see, okay, which ones do you fit? If someone is overweight, then that's quite an obvious one. But you can't necessarily tell that someone's sleeping 4 hours a night, or that someone has really low iron levels, or that someone has whatever it is that will be one of those boxes. So it can be quite because it causes then a lot of that body image, the insecurities, because people are aware if they are not a weight that they feel comfortable in, or maybe they've changed weight, maybe, and that's up and down, we're not just talking about weight gain. And body image is such a delicate topic that, do you almost feel like when you do broach it, because I imagine that although you don't have it as a huge focus, you still have to address it. There's almost like a therapist side of it as well. You have to be so empathetic and delicate, because there's probably a lot of background baggage that people are carrying, especially if the more extreme you go, if it's super, super underweight or super, super overweight, and then everything in between. How do you approach that and manage that alongside, the scientific part of it? There's also this huge, like, empathetic person to person connection that you have to approach as well.
Yeah. First thing I would say is you're 100% right. Like, there is a kind of therapeutic side to it. I am not a therapist. And with nearly 100% of my patients who, work on body image issues with, I will say, if you're not already working with a therapist, then get one, because it can be so, so helpful. And often when I approach this with my patients and talk about these sorts of things, it comes from exploring their experiences in life. And when I talk to them about their childhood and what was their eating experiences like, or what was their weight like as they were growing up, then things come out. If you can develop a good relationship with your patient, then actually they'll tell you about the fact that they were, I don't know, somebody said something to them about their body and that stuck with them throughout. And that has actually been one of their motivational kind of forces as to why they eat a certain way or why they want to be a certain size. It comes up a lot. And it's really important to explore that, because I think it really speaks to what their behavior is like now in terms of eating. But I'm not a therapist, so it's really important that they do work with a therapist as well, especially if body image comes up as a big topic. And this is really common again in PCOS. PCOS patients often have body image issues, and actually they're also more likely to have some eating disorders too, especially binge eating disorders.
Yeah. When you kind of refer to it could be something of past childhood or conversations, I guess often it can be something that's so, but like you almost think it's quite small, and obviously it's the most significant thing to that person. So in no way am I belittling it by saying it's small, but it's a small moment,
Yeah.
and then it can trigger a whole lot of things afterwards. And going on to the disordered eating topic, what does it actually mean to have disordered eating patterns? What does that actually look like, and what would you define it as?
So really good question as well. Um, there's a difference between having an eating disorder and having disordered eating patterns. You have to meet certain criteria to have a diagnosed eating disorder, and there's a spectrum of those. But even when people have, I'd say, a difficult relationship with food, that food takes over their thoughts and actually what they eat is constantly on their mind, or maybe it's about uh, even orthorexia, which is now one of the kind of more classified eating disorders, where it's obsessed with eating healthily and having a healthy diet. That can start off as, oh, I saw so and so on social media saying I need to eat this green smoothie every morning for my breakfast, and then you're putting on the pressure on yourself to achieve these goals that are, first of all, unrealistic, but also unnecessary. And so it might just be start with one small thing, but it's the fact that it takes over their energy, their brain space. Like, you start to think about food and what you can and can't eat all the time, and then you obviously could go on to develop more of a classified eating disorder. But it starts with something like that.